Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty, and let's create another snowman. I love this guy with his tall hat and those little stripes on there, his cute little birds that are in here, and then his sweet little kitty pal just tucked right inside of his arm. I'm going to give you some tips on how to draw a snowman. Yeah, you can get some tips on it's more than just circles when you're thinking about drawing a snowman. And then I'm going to walk you through all the steps of the watercolor. For those of you who would like to have a tracer, I do have a sketchbook membership. That is in my Ko-fi shop, and that's where I have all the line drawings for my items that I draw on my page, because if drawing's not your thing but you still like to paint, I can do the drawing, and then you can do the painting, and you can just enjoy the whole process. Or even if you want to learn how to draw, you can use my tracers to go ahead and practice drawing. I love to use my tracers. I draw it first on paper, but then I use my tracers when I want to put them on my watercolor paper. Well, let's go ahead and start, and I'll give you a few tips of when you're drawing a snowman. Well, let's start with a few tips on how to draw a fun little snowman. When I draw the head, I kind of more do like an upside down U shape. So I don't want to go all the way around and make a complete circle. I'm going to stop about right here. And then I'm going to come in just a little bit. Then I'm going to branch out and create this shape. Kind of more of like a little blobby shape. These are all going to be slightly different. And then you just create this little gentle shape at the bottom. Now to place his nose, you're going to look for where the middle is. I'm going to make a little line here. You're going to figure out where your eyes are from the nose, but I'm going to start here at the top of my nose. Make this little kind of a little C shape. That's going to be for my nose. I'm going to do a little wiggle line like this, and I always end with my noses pointing up. I think that just looks cute. Then you can bring it down, create a little bit more wiggle shape here. Now that might be too many wiggles, but you can figure out how many wiggles you want on your carrot. Maybe like that. Then you'll erase that line. Now you're going to figure out where your eyes are, and you want to place your eyes a little close to each other. I think it looks cute that way. I like to have my eyes pointing in like that, so they're created that way. It just gives it a nice little sweet look. I'm going to create the smile. I'm going to start here off to the side, because now my snowman is looking sideways. That's the great way to do the nose, is to have it look sideways. I want to place my smile right like that, so a little outside of my eyes. Now when I'm doing this little sweet smile, I'm going to come off first, come down, and then make a little soft W shape, and then bring it up. And then I have a cute little smile. And from here, you can add all the little extras of what you'd like to do. My little guy has a jacket on and lots of embellishments, but this is how you can start for a simple little snowman. Before I go to the painting steps, I quickly wanted to say that I always draw my items on like a copy paper, and then once I have them traced, I use a light box. Now if you don't have a light box, you could easily use a window or something like that, and then I can place my paper, my watercolor paper, over the top, and I'm going to see my image. That just really saves my watercolor paper from getting a lot of different pencil marks on it. I can draw a lot lighter, and then I can come in with a kneaded eraser if I need to, go over my line work to soften it even a little bit more, but work your drawings out on a plain paper, then transfer them onto your watercolor paper so you don't get a lot of smearing or extra pencil marks you might not want. Now we can go ahead and start the painting part. I'll start it with letting you know what kind of watercolor paper I'm using. I'm using the Canson brand watercolor. They're 140-pound watercolor paper. It's a student grade, but I have used this for years and I get really great results on it. It's very reasonably priced. And I'm using the Rubens watercolor, but I always say just buy whatever paints you can afford. Spend a tiny bit more on your paper and just use the paint that you can afford, because it comes in a whole range of costs. Now for my sketchbook members, you're going to be getting a color swatch for the colors that I use, as well as a copy of the painting I did, so you have a reference. I'm going to start out with using my red, and I have put a little water on my palette to moisten it up, and we're going to start there. With watercolor, if you're new to watercolor, you always start light and bright and then work your dark colors on top. First you're painting the light and brights, and then you're going to be adding your shadows. It's just kind of the opposite of what acrylic paint is. Now I'm going to start with my red, because red usually fades fairly a lot, and you'll probably need at least 3 coats. This is mixed to about maybe about milk consistency. It's a little thicker than what I usually start with, because I know it's going to be fading. Now I'm going to start at the top here and work my way down, and I often have a paper towel in my hand so I can tap my paintbrush on there first so I don't have too much pigment on there because I want to be able to control it somewhat. I'm using a number 6 round brush. It has a nice little point on it. It's the Princeton brand. I do have some links down in my description box of some of the items I use. So if you're interested in looking and checking out what I use, you can easily go down there and click one of the links if you would like. Now I'm going to come back in here and do this one. I'm going to paint around that little black part of his face because I'm going to want it to look very much like it's black, and I'm going to avoid putting my red on there. So I'm going to be doing like a negative painting process where I paint around it and leave it open. I'll come back and add the black a little later. Okay, the next little area, I can't forget to do this little heart. When I first did my painting, I forgot to do it. So I want to make sure I add that on there. Now let's go ahead and do his scarf. And I'm going to just completely cover this. I'm not going to let any of the white paper show. I want it to be kind of a nice festive looking red. And I'm just going to apply this in there. I'm just following along my drawing in those parts. I want to kind of let my paper dry on its own. Your colors will be a lot more rich if you allow that color to kind of sink down into your paper. Sometimes I do dry it because I just can't be patient enough to wait, but I do like it if the color has that time to kind of sink down into that paper and really make that color kind of come to life. Now this is student grade paper, so it's going to dry a lot faster than like 100% cotton paper would dry. It's a little bit smoother than some of your 100% cotton papers. All papers are different, actually. Even some of the student grade papers can have a little bit more bump to it. So you need to find what works for you, but I like the Canson because it is a little bit smoother. I can use my pens on there a little bit easier, and I really like that. Okay, let's add a little bit more water. Now when you're doing watercolor, you can't see it off to the side, but I have one that I use to wash my brushes out with, and then one that has clean water, and that comes in handy so you're not contaminating any of your paint. Let's add a little bit of red here. I'm going to speed this up a little bit because this is just the base coating, and you'll see how I'm applying it basically the same on all my little red areas. My red is starting to dry just a little bit, and I can come back in and add another layer. So I know I want it underneath the wing to be darker. So I'm going to be adding the color and on his belly too, and a little bit on his tail. I'm not going to cover up all of that beginning layer, maybe just a few taps on his wing. And I'll come to do this as well. So watch these next steps as I'm putting in my shadows, and you'll be able to see where I'm adding that next layer. Now this is probably, will most likely need a third layer, so we'll just keep on working on this and filling in the areas. Some of the shadow areas I know I want to have on the scarf is right here because this is tucking underneath, so I need to have that to be darker. I'm going to put a little bit over here too. Underneath, this would be dark. Coming out. This would be lighter, but I'm going to create just a little bit of darkness there. Bring it down to make it more colorful. Let's tap in a little bit here. Now to make that kind of come together, I'm going to rinse my brush out. I'm going to dip it into some clear water, give it a squeeze, and then I'm going to come in and just manipulate this color just a little bit and bring my areas together. And if you want to leave some of that original color showing that's underneath there, you could just go around it. So maybe I'll just leave a peek of it showing right there and add those colors. Now let's continue on with the mittens. Now I need to decide where I want to start next. Watercolor has this unique property where it's going to travel wherever your paper is wet. So I want to choose an area where I don't have any wet watercolor. And let's go ahead and start with the hat. I'm going to be just using a black color out of my set. It's mixed to about, let's say, coffee consistency. So it's a little thicker than tea, but you can still see through it when I spin it. So let's start there. Black is always one of those colors where you want to start lighter and then bring in your darker tones. Mostly with all watercolor, that's where you want to start, is light and then add more colors. You can always add more color. You just can't take it out as easily. So it's best to start light and bright. Now, if you decide you want to leave a light spot, a really light highlight on your color, that's when you would leave the color of your paper, because that's going to be your brightest whites on a watercolor. All right, let's go ahead and work on the kitty, the tops of these little pockets and those areas. We're going to start with kind of a brighter orange color because I'm making an orange kitty. I'm gonna mix this to about coffee consistency too. Now we're gonna do a little wet on wet blend on this guy. So that means I'm gonna take my colors wet, and now I'm gonna pick up another wet color, and I'm gonna do kind of this rusty color that's over here in my set. Now this could be mixed to about the coffee consistency as well. And I'm going to be tapping just a little spot on his forehead, just to add a little bit of color. And because my paper is wet underneath, those colors will kind of blend together. I'm gonna give him a little bit of a spot here, and a few little spots on his tail. Now, because this is wet, it's going to dry a little bit softer, so it's not going to look too liney. I will be adding some more color onto the kitty as well, because his spots will dry. Let's tap a little bit in his ear too, and maybe even just a tiny bit on his chest, and we'll see what we get. Now I'm going to use those same colors, and I'm going to be doing the tops of his little pockets. Now we need to let all of that dry. Let's choose another area. Let's do the fur around his coat, and then the fur on his cuffs. Let's do this. Okay, I wanted to stop at this point and show you that my painting is not perfect. I haven't followed exactly in. I'm going to be going in with some micron pen at the end to do some pen ink, and that's when all of it will come together. So don't worry too much if you're not painting exactly in the lines. You can make this all work even if you're not painting inside of the lines, which is good to know. Let's work a little bit more on the red. I feel like I still need to add some darker shadows here so I can get some nice interest going on the inside of my scarf and around the corners, and maybe a little bit more on this mitten, but I'll work on that first and then we'll come back around. I'm going to do is give all of this a good chance to dry so I can work on those next layers. So I'm going to bump over and do this little tree here, and I'm going to be using kind of a dark green and then just more of the teal color that I'm using in his coat. So I'm going to be using both of those colors to be able to create that look. So I'm going to just choose like a real nice earthy green is what I chose to use. These are really small spots, so you probably want this mixed to about milk consistency, a little bit more pigment, a little less water. And the reason why I say that is because I want to have a lot of control over it. I want to be able to place my color. So I'm going to start out with this earthy kind of green color, give it a tap on my brush, my paper, so I don't have too much on there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and create a pattern on every other one. Now my color is still wet in that green, that darker green, but I'm okay if they mix a little bit. Okay, that's for that part. And then for my trunk, I'll go ahead and put the little browns that I have already mixed up over here. I'll use those in the trunk. Now to hide, I've gotten this on here and it might be a little dark. So what I can do is rinse my brush out, take some clean water and give it a squeeze, and then I can come in and pull some off and create a highlight there so it's not so dark. There, that'll work. So I have a shadow on one side and the highlight on the other. Now let's go ahead and put some of these blue shadows on my snow to give it a little bit more contour. So by adding these light shades of blue, I can make my snowman look like it's more curved and there's some shadow on that. Even though it is a white snowman, I still want to have some interest to it. So I'm going to be using that light blue color again, that sky blue color, and I'm going to be mixing it to very much like a tea consistency, mostly water, just a tiny bit of color. And I'm going to be putting these shadows, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to be putting these shadows off to the side of his face here and a little bit here. I don't want to get it too far in on the cheek area because if I do that, my colors will mix and you'll end up with more of a purple looking cheek, and I don't really want that. I want more of this pinkish looking cheek. Now I did go in and use some colored pencils on this at the end too. So you can do your cheek work all in color pencil, but I'm going to show you how I'm putting the blue on and trying to keep it more on the outside. So I'm going to start with this light color, bring it in off to the side and coming down. Now you can kind of see how my red is mixing a little bit there because my red is so much thicker, but I can pick it up by just squeezing my brush, getting it dry, and then picking some of that color up before it spreads too far. Watercolor is going to dry lighter, so what we see when it's wet won't look exactly like what it will when it dries. But I'm going to tip that on there again. Put a little bit on this side too. A little underneath his hat, there would be a shadow there. Okay, we're going to let that sit. I'm going to add some down here because there would be a shadow down underneath his jacket, and then off to the side and then down below. Now while this is wet, I'm going to mix up, I'm going to come in and take my brush, rinse it off with water, give it a squeeze, and then I'm going to gently tickle that area so I don't have bands of color. You can kind of see how my colors are looking band. Look at how that red is really traveled over there. I have kind of a purpley snowman there with the red and the blue. I'm going to lift that color, so I'm going to just take my brush, rinse it out with water, and then give it a squeeze so it's fairly dry, and I'm going to just have to work with this color because I can't get it out now, pretty much. And it's just going to have that little bit of cold cheek or cold chin, I guess. The look will be that. Now, when you're doing this process, there's only so far you can lift, and you will start to rough your paper up and you'll get a different texture there. So there's only so much you can do, and then you just kind of got to stop. Let's see if I can add some water here and soften these lines a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Now, if you want to do a little darker shadow, you can also come in, pick up a little bit more of a darker blue. This is more of a Pays green, give it a tap, and then you can lay that onto the outside just to add even a little bit more. I'm just adding little taps of color. Just a tiny bit more dark blue. Maybe that's what I'll try down here. We'll see. I don't want to get too much down there. And then let's add a little tap of it here too. Okay. Let's fix some of that bandy look, because I don't want it to be bandy. So I'm going to add some clean, my brush is wiped off with clean water, and I'm just kind of softening those edges a little bit and pushing that color around. There, that looks great. Since the center of my face still is dry, I'm going to pick up some orange color, and that's what I'm going to use to create my nose. When I mix this color, I really don't want a lot of water in it, again, because I want to have that control. So I'm going to be mixing a little thicker consistency, probably in that milk range where it's mostly pigment with some of area in there. There's another layer called cream too, so it's even mostly just pigment, but that looks pretty good. I'm gonna just come in and paint my nose this color. Orange is another one of those colors that's gonna fade a lot. We're gonna make all this wet, but then I'm gonna pop in a little bit of the red underneath and let it kind of blend together. So I'm gonna pick up some of my red, rinse my brush out, come over here, pick up some of the red, and I'm gonna tap the base of the nose around here. And then I'm gonna add it just to the bottom. And because my paint is wet, it's gonna do that blending on its own and create those little tiny shadows for me. Okay. All right, I hold it up a little bit so you can kind of see how it's still got that brighter orange, but it's got a little dark of that red that's showing in there. That should be a pretty blend. We'll see how it dries. Okay, let's work some on this teal. So I got to mix up a fair amount of the color. So it's a larger area, so I'm going to mix up a bigger batch of the color. I'm going to want it at least probably more like a milk consistency, like milk, because I want a little bit more control over where my color is going, because it's going to go around that red and the cat and all those other elements, and I don't want to have it blend into those areas, so I'm going to have it a little bit thicker. Okay, I think that's pretty. Let's go ahead and tap this. This is another color that's going to fade, but when I'm in the end, I'm going to be wanting darker shadows, like underneath here, underneath this area here would be darker, back by the cat would be darker, and underneath those areas. So when I'm laying in my color, I'm going to be thinking about that. All right, his jacket's gonna dry a little bit, and then I can see if I need to put more color in there or not. Let's work a little bit on his cheeks. Now I'm gonna be using that red color, the same red color that I used. And this is gonna be mixed to about coffee consistency. I'm still gonna have some pigment in there, but I'm gonna be able to see through it. And I'm going to go right underneath his eye, and I'm gonna tap that in irregularly, so it's not just a complete little circle. And then I'm going to come off to the side of his nose over here, because it's going to be under part of it. Now I need to rinse my brush out. And then I'm going to pick up that clean water again and give my paper, or give it a squeeze. And then I'm going to gently touch the outside. Now, if this doesn't move for you, you have to pick up a little bit more water, because I want that color to move just ever so slightly and create these really pretty little blushed cheek looks. Now, if you don't feel confident in doing both at the same time, you could do one and then do your other one. So you can see how it's kind of blushing out and giving it just that real subtle look. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. Give him that rosy glow. Okay, you know, now it doesn't look so bad that I have that little bit of a rosy glow underneath on his chin. It kind of looks like it's supposed to be there. Now you can decide how much you want to blend these out. You can add just even a little bit more water, and you can even soften them even a little bit more if you'd like to. Now there is a point where you kind of got to stop, otherwise your paper gets too wet and you're going to end up with some damage to it. So there, I think that looks good. I'm going to let that dry and call it good. Oh, there's one more area, the dark of the hat, or the white part of the hat. I want it to look white, but I don't want it to look so stark. So what I'm going to do is take some of my black and do it where it's that tea consistency. So really a lot of water just a little bit of color, not much at all. Give it a tap on there. And then I'm going to come on one side and make a little kind of a gray shadow partway across. And that's just going to give it a little bit of color and make that white pop out just a little bit and make it look a little bit more contoured. I'm going to come on this side here and give it just a little bit of a shadow there. So then it's going to have that highlight kind of in the center of the hat. Yeah, that's better. Now, to even make this a little lighter, I'm going to paint my background with clean water first, and then I'm going to add the color on top. That way I'll get a very light background and I won't have to worry about that color overpowering on what I'm doing. So you'll see like this wet shine on the back of your paper, and that's what you're looking for. You want to see that paper is wet. You'll see it glistening. You don't want a lot of puddles, but you're looking to wet your paper so that you see more of like a glistening background. My color, and I'm going to randomly brush it in, and you're going to kind of see how it moves around a little bit more. And I don't have to have all coverage either. I can leave some wet spots. If you get too much, you can pick it up with your brush. Dab your brush off and then pick it up. So I'm getting away a little bit too much there because my red is really running, and I don't really want it to run way throughout there. Now, a good tool to use for the backgrounds like this, and I'm gonna go grab some real quick. I'm gonna stop the video and I'll be right back, and I'm gonna go grab some toilet paper. Toilet paper works great for picking up these little extra puddles, and it won't leave a lot of texture on your painting, so it works great for that. Okay, so the toilet paper or tissue, a light paper, you can just put it on the edge and it will pick up some of the water for you. You can actually dab it in there, and it's a great way to make clouds too. So this will leave a real subtle kind of look. I'm giving my kitty a green tail. Okay, yeah, I like that look. I think that looks great. It just makes it kind of a softer little look to the background. It gives it a little bit of a cloudy feel to it. So toilet paper or like a Kleenex or something like that would work too. A nice soft tissue paper. Now on my pattern, I did do some of the snowflakes, and I did those in paint. I used the same color, but in order to do that technique, you're going to need to make your paint a little bit thicker so you have a little bit more control over where your paint is going so it doesn't float all the way out. You want to make sure your background is fairly dry. You wouldn't want to have all of that water motion going on there because otherwise your snowflakes wouldn't hold their shape. And I'm going to use the tip of my brush. This is a 10. It's a fairly big brush, but I'm going to give this a try and see if this will work. So a snowflake, I just do them simply by making a line straight down. And then I come across like that, do another line, and do another line like that. So I do them real simple. So I do a line down, okay, so you can leave them like that, or you can go ahead, and I have this little mister bottle, and what I can do is I can spray them a little bit, and they'll soften into the background. So I can let that work, and it'll do its magic, and it'll just kind of soften them and make them look a little bit more diffused, I guess is a good way to say it. So I'm gonna let that dry, and then I'm gonna start with my pen work. Okay, now I'm going to add the detail parts, and I'm going to be using Micron pens because they're a permanent ink. You can put them on. Once they're dry, you can go ahead and even add more watercolor steps on the top if you want to, but they are permanent ink. I'm also going to be using some white pens. The Signo Uniball pen is one of my favorite white inks. I also like the Jelly Roll too. Sometimes it works, but it's got this great small tip on it, which I really like. It's smaller than this one. Sometimes this shows up, sometimes it doesn't. So I use both of them. And I'm also going to be using some colored pencils, and I have the Prismacolor student grade ones, and I also have the premium ones as well. The premium ones have just a little bit more coloration, pigmentation in the the pencils themselves. They're nice and creamy, but I use them both. These ones I think you can buy at Walmart, and then the other ones I believe I either bought at Hobby Lobby or Michael's, but I'll have some links down in the description box too, so you can go ahead and check them out. Now I'm going to start the tracing process. I'm going to be using a 1 for these super small details on the face is what I'm going to do. And I'm basically just following my pencil lines and going around that area. I'm going to do the top part of his eyes more of a black color, and I'm going to scribble in these areas. Now I like to scribble if it works for me, and I'm going to be scribbling around and leaving just a tiny little bit of highlight, the catch light in the eyes, and that's what's going to bring this little guy to life, is by having those catch lights in his eye. Now, not every time I try that I'm able to keep the black part in there. And then if I don't, or the white part, if I lose that, that's when I can put the Uniball pen in there to add a little bit of the white in. Let's do the same work around the carrot. Now, you don't have to follow exact. I like to kind of do more sketchy type of work. I don't necessarily have to feel like I have to go exactly like a color book style, which is what I did here. Basically, I did my line work first, and then I went ahead and did my watercolor. You can do it either way. This time I'm doing it the opposite way. I'm going to put a few little lines on this carrot to bring it to life, like that. I'll be adding some white to that too. I'm going to use this small little one here to do the smile. Okay, and then I'm going to be adding them on. You can stop and start, add little kind of marks that are just, you know, random little marks, stop and start. You can make little dots to add some interest that way, to give it even more of a whimsical look, to add that little extra character to him. And I'm just going to follow along, and I'm going to speed it up here, and you can watch me put the black work of the pen work on. Now let's work in a little bit of the white. Let's come in and add just a little bit of sparkle of the white, and I'm going to come in and add some patterns to some different things, and I'll be adding a little bit of scribbly bits to add some highlights on some different things. So I'm going to speed this up and let you watch me put the little bit of the sparkles of the white in. Okay, we have that part done. Let's use a little bit of some colored pencil. This is where I'm going to finish off his eye. I think I'm going to be giving him like this turquoisey shade of eye that'll go with the painting. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to do green or turquoise, and I think I'm going to do turquoise. So I'm going to just start with the lightest pencil first. Put that over the bottom. And then I'm going to come in with the dark one. And let's add just the darkest at the bottom. I should have maybe sharpened these a little bit before I use them, but that'll just add that little pretty bit of eye to it. Now, I'm going to come in and add a little bit more pressure, and this will kind of, colored pencils, if you haven't used them a lot, they will burnish into each other and the colors will kind of melt. So I have light texture at first, and then I'm going to be adding the darker texture in. Now for his cheeks, you can add a little bit of color there too. Let's try this color. I do have this other color here, and let's see if we can't get to bring up those cheek levels just a little bit to add a little bit of interest that way. Now when I'm doing this area, I'm going to hold my pencil more flat and do kind of like a little circle. Now this paper doesn't have a lot of texture, so it's not going to pick up a lot of the paper texture. Okay, so that kind of showed up. Let's add a little bit darker. Let's add it this way. And let's add just a tiny bit more. This is all optional, and you can just try it out. It's kind of fun. Now his cheek would be a little darker underneath here on this side because it's underneath that carrot nose. And it's kind of fun to use some other art mediums with your watercolor. It doesn't all have to just be watercolor. You can mix it up and add a few things. This is about in between coffee and milk. You know, it's not too thick. But it's still got a fair amount of color in there. Now I'm just going to take something. My brush is loaded, and I'm going to be tapping this up. And this, instead of adding white snow, I'm doing kind of a blue snow look. Let's tap some down here, this white area. Okay, just a little bit. All right, now take a look, and if you see some dots that you don't really care for, like I don't really like this one next to my cat, so I'm gonna give that, or this one here, you can pick them up with your kind of your damp paper towel and pick them up. So yeah, that looks good. Let's take a look at what this looks like sitting in my studio amongst some of the other of the winter collection items I have worked on so far on my YouTube channel. And here he is, looking cute as can be. I did give my kitty some whiskers and a little pink nose. If you're new to my channel and you like doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It can really help my channel grow. If you enjoyed this snowman tutorial, here's a playlist with several other winter-themed ideas, from gingerbread, Santas, and even some winter simple landscapes. Well, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again, and perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.